Recently, I found myself in a bit of a conundrum. See, most of my work here on YouTube is spent creating long-form content, mostly because those are the type of projects I find the most enjoyable to work on, and personally, the kind of videos I prefer to watch from other creators. Also, outside of those single game focused deep dives, I found myself a new hobby in giving coverage to the modern survival horror revival taking place in the indie scene, which is a fairly recent phenomenon. Meaning that I end up having to squeeze several short demos into a single video that usually tends to hit a long runtime as well. There's a bit of a problem with that spread though. It leaves this small blind spot in my workflow, because there are plenty of demos out there that are both too short for me to make long-form content on and don't slot into the survival horror genre. So not only can I not include them in my Resident Evil clone videos, but they don't offer up enough content to make one of my normal long-form reviews. Well, you know what they say, necessity is the mother of invention, which is why I decided to create a series meant to fill that gap in the metaphorical market. A place where I can show off upcoming projects that I see a lot of potential in, unrestrained by my constant need to make videos far too long for their own good. So with that in mind, what's up guys? I'm Jared from Avalanche Reviews, and this is DEMO-lition.
Do you actually know what we're looking for here?
When I say it, I'll tell you.
Samurai Unicorn is an action horror shooter hybrid being developed by It's Got Stealth set in the fictional cyberpunk dystopia, Australia. At the moment, this demo is only available to Patreon backers, and after talking to its developers, I don't think that's going to change anytime in the near future. So if anything from here forward looks enticing to you, I'll have a link to their Patreon in the description and the pinned comment. Before we plow ahead though, this being a new endeavor for me and all, I'd appreciate any feedback you might have in the comments section, and maybe, if you're a really nice person, like the video as well. Starting this bad boy up, we're treated to a bit of, well, not story necessarily, but more of a setup, and a good one at that. Without having to spoon feed us obviously written exposition, the conversation between these two organically lets us know that we're playing as some sort of a cop named Chloe. We don't exactly know what she's trying to investigate at the moment, but the idea is that she might be able to find some clues by digging around in the abandoned head office of a group called Goliath. I'm assuming there's some kind of Umbrella-esque megacorporation with tons of power from how spooked Chloe's partner is about treading on their turf, and furthermore, this seems to be one of those off-the-books type of investigations. After the two head inside and split up, you're finally given control over Chloe, and I think the best way to describe how it feels moving her around is balanced. It's like a mechanical middle ground between third-person shooters like Max Payne, where your character can pivot on a dime, and something like RE2 Remake or Dead Space, where you'll need to take into account more realistic feeling momentum and Chloe adjusting her body to change directions. This is a control style that I've been gravitating towards for a while now. I mean, I do enjoy the kind of games that give me a full one-to-one representation of my inputs on screen, but I also appreciate a slight layer of abstraction that forces me to move my character around somewhat like a real person. Now, it's obviously hard to tell if this short slice of a demo will fully represent the kind of design that we can expect from the full game, but I will say what is here feels like a great combination of exploration-based gameplay and more linear action sequences. The first hallway that you come to has a single door that you can enter at the moment, but as you move through the area, you'll find paths that snake back to this little intersection, letting you open up more offshoots and a locker room where you can grab a shotgun and some other items. I think a person probably could approach the game more like an action title and get by without engaging with the side exploration very much. But with the extra resources that you net yourself by looking around a little and returning to previous areas, I don't imagine too many people will be going that route. The devs do a great job of incentivizing some extra looking around by hiding ammo, healing items, and other loot in little out-of-the-way spots. And this first section is kind of littered with them, providing a nice little hint that you might want to keep your head on a swivel moving forward. Speaking of which, once we make it down a set of stairs and into the kitchen, Chloe comes across the demo's first and most common enemy. They're called vermin, but it's spelled VR-min, which I thought was a really nice little cyberpunk touch. I guess these things are kind of common in this world, as the police have developed an official guideline for taking them out, and the only method that seems to work is dismemberment, which is something that applies evenly to all of the bad guys you'll come across in this demo, minus the boss. It's basically a universal rule that headshots are useless, and aiming for center mass is good for two things: a bit of stagger and wasting ammo. At the moment, the best strat that I've developed is to target a leg, and when they're on the ground, try to circle around for a quick stomp at an angle that keeps them from being able to deliver any damage from the ground. Now, I'll admit that when I first streamed this demo, I was having issues with the early moments of combat. Despite the shooting feeling great and the addition of a directional dodge move, there just seemed to be a lot stacked up against me. Now, one-on-one, in an ideal environment, these vermin basically pose no threat. But often you'll be in a room with several or just a single one at an uncomfortably close range. And these things seem to have two speeds from what I can tell: a slow stumbling limp and a full-on 28 days later athlete sprint with, might I add, a very cool stumbling animation. On top of that, they can really sneak up on you. Like here in this office room, it's easy to be dealing with one and have another two just kind of show up behind you. The point is that these vermin aren't as minor of a threat as their scrawny frame may have you thinking. They can often close the gap between you and them very fast, and their attacks are not to be taken lightly. Depending on the strike's windup, Cole can only take maybe 2 or 3 hits before she's down for the count, and since health restoring items have a bit of startup to their animation, it's not like you can easily pop a quick heal when you're in danger. The difficulty in these early sections is real, and if you're anything like me, it's going to take you a few trips to the game over screen before you acclimate to what the game's expecting of you. In terms of the shooting, we've got a system that rewards slow, controlled shots over mag dumping. Like the aforementioned RE2 remake, the longer you aim, the more damage you can do, represented by the on-screen reticle shrinking. Usually, in other games that use a similar system, moving around will disrupt this process, but I kind of like that not being the case here. It makes a concentrated shot more achievable in a real fight, but still encourages a slower approach to make sure you get the best bang for your buck. Speaking of which, I found the resources to be really well managed in Samurai Unicorn. I mean, we're not exactly talking the same level of scarcity as you'd find in a survival horror title, but a very nice balance of rarity and availability. To put that another way, I don't think I ever ran out of ammo for any of my guns, but at the same time, I never quite felt confident that I wouldn't, which is precisely the middle ground that I enjoy in video games like this. Alright, so I have a bit of a confession to make. Now, on my first playthrough of this demo, I found all of the stuff we've just talked about to be really well implemented and fun. There were, of course, small cracks that were noticeable in some of the mechanics, a lot of which could certainly be explained away by this being a very early look at an unfinished product, but overall, things felt very tight and perfectly functional. However, I just couldn't help but feel like there was something missing. I mean, I was having fun dismembering enemies with a shotgun, dodging their attacks, exploring, collecting hidden items, but well, I think I said it best in my stream of that first experience. But I feel like there's some sort of a mechanic that I'm not utilizing here. I couldn't quite explain it at the time, but it just felt like something was off. Like I wasn't seeing the entire picture. And, well, that ended up being right on the money. After proceeding through the abandoned Goliath building, Cole comes across what seems to be a severed hand in some sort of a container, and because she's apparently lost her damn mind, her first instinct is to let it out, which results in this thing latching onto her and Cole falling over a guardrail during the struggle. And this is when the demo really shows you what it's all about. This symbiotic hand that's latched onto Cole somehow emits what I struggle to call anything other than a laser samurai. Its purpose is to protect its host, and to be honest, our future cop is handling the situation of having a foreign object permanently attached to her suspiciously well. Regardless though, this is when that missing puzzle piece I was talking about before gets slotted into place. Unicorn here can be activated with a button press, and he serves three main purposes in terms of the gameplay. First is your ability to perform a melee attack with him, and just to show you how convenient that can be, let's compare the time to kill between shooting bad guys and using Unicorn. Yeah, so that's definitely preferable. However, to keep you from just using this guy as your main attack from now on, he works on a meter system. One use of an attack drains 1 bar of the 3 that you have in this demo. Now, in regards to getting that meter back up to full, there are usables that you can find scattered around, but that's kinda lame compared to the other way that you can perform that same function. You can use Unicorn to block a single incoming attack, which is a great answer to my previous comment on how easy it can be for Cole to get wiped by a few hits, but that's just half the story. Because hitting the block button just as an attack lands not only restores 1 charge of energy, but staggers the enemy and sets them up for a free samurai strike, or in more understandable terms, a dope as hell finisher. I think the closest thing that I can use as an example for how satisfying this can feel during combat is the Isen mechanic in the Onimusha games. There's something almost zen-like about pulling off one of these things and getting to see Unicorn just have his way with the enemy. But just like the melee attacks, samurai strikes also require a bit of balance, and I would say that comes in the form of challenge. Each enemy is going to have a series of attacks that they can perform, and getting used to all of their timings, wind-ups, and patterns is going to provide more than enough difficulty to prevent you from just spamming block on every attack. On top of that, you're not exactly given a lot of leeway in terms of active frames, so you're really going to need to get your timing nice and tight for this mechanic. And now that we're finally playing with Samurai Unicorn's full arsenal, I gotta say this game is incredibly fun. The shooting, dodge mechanic, how dangerous enemies are, and the addition of Unicorn's movesets, they all mesh together perfectly to make for something that feels wholly original and really well thought out. On top of that, while it might not be necessarily content in this demo, based on trailers and teaser videos, it looks like the game is going to have a bunch of really cool locations to visit. And if the Goliath offices are any indication of the quality that we can expect, I would say this has me hyped almost more than the gameplay. Getting back on track though, as I continued through the demo, I found out there's a bit of functionality hidden in here that it doesn't outright tell you about. Like the fact that using Unicorn's sword attack during a dodge roll makes for a really cool looking dash attack, and that same strike can be used on enemies that have been downed for a quick kill without draining any of your meter. Although I will admit this can be kind of finicky. Sometimes it'll work and sometimes it'll result in a regular melee hit, which will take away 1 bar of energy, sort of defeating the purpose of doing it in the first place. On the topic of things being finicky though, I also found this really cool little glitch where if you dash strike and then hit the button once again in quick succession, the game will treat it like Unicorn's sword is out all the time. So all I had to do was just walk near an enemy and they would get cut to pieces for having the audacity to exist in my proximity. Now normally healing requires sitting through a not long but definitely not short animation, but I found out that this could be cancelled with a dodge roll and you'll still receive the full heal. Same thing goes for energy restoring items. The only trick is you have to wait for a slight portion of the animation to finish before you do it, or it'll just continue after you've dodged. But right around the time I started getting comfortable with all of this, Samurai Unicorn threw me into a boss fight to test just how true that was. Walking into this room, we find our partner Gabe strung up by this guy called Corpse Processor, which is the kind of name that you hear and think to yourself, there's just no way that's not already a death metal band.
Enough talk. Time to die.
Behind you.
Sick-ass name aside, the Corpse Processor just hand waves your bullets away, so this is going to be a strictly unicorn fight, and that's great because, well, again, I think I said it best the first time I played this demo. This is where it comes, right? Yes! Dude, that feels so fucking good. The fight has 3 different stages, and each one is just insanely fun to learn patterns for. I will say that this guy's attacks are a lot easier to parry than your average enemy, and if this wasn't such a blast of a boss fight, that might be a complaint. But luckily that's not the case. Maybe in the finished game, having his attacks do a lot more damage would be a nice balance though. But those of you who watch my content regularly, you know how this goes. Once I start with the nitpicking, it is hard for me to stop, so let's take a break from showering Samurai Unicorn with praise to point out a few of the issues that I found. Before we throw any haymakers though, it is really important to point something out. While I've been calling this a demo throughout the video, after talking to the game's developer, It's Got Stealth, it seems like this is more of a very early playtest build as a reward for Patreon backers. That being the case, there is a lot in here that is yet to be finished or properly bug tested. For example, some of the dialogue consists of placeholder voiceovers, and controller inputs in the menu sometimes work and sometimes don't. So instead of looking at what's about to follow as complaints necessarily, let's think of them more as player feedback for a project that I have enough faith in to back with my own money. Alright, so starting out with the issue that I struggled with the most, the keyboard controls don't exactly feel very well laid out to me. I mean, moving feels fine, and mouse aiming is always going to be preferable to using analog sticks, but some of the game's functions are mapped to keys that seem a little too far away from ASWD or just flat out don't work very well. For example, close melee strike is set to V, which isn't the furthest key to hit, but at least for me, it feels kind of awkward to reach for and requires me to take my index finger off of D, which is a real problem because my strategy of stomping bad guys on the floor kind of requires that I continually circle around them to avoid taking any damage. And previously, I had a whole rant planned up covering how the dodge key serves double duty as run, and I've always felt that my left pinky is good enough at holding a key down for long periods, but not necessarily hitting that key with any reliable timing. But then I figured there really wasn't a point because all of the issues that I have with the demo's controls could be condensed down to a single gripe. At the moment, there's no way to remap your keybinds. I mean, if I was able to just throw my spacebar and side mouse buttons into the mix, I could solve every single problem I would even talk about here. So when the devs give us some button mapping options, all of this essentially goes away. For the time being though, I would say a controller actually makes for the best option to play this demo. I mean, it's definitely not my preference to play any shooter with an analog stick, but dodging and attacking just works so much better, and I was able to parry enemy strikes with way more reliability. The only issue that I found was the dashing required holding the B button down, and that meant that I couldn't use my right thumb to look around while I was running. So that functionality was basically only good for long straightaways or wide open areas, which are two things that you're just not going to find a lot in this demo. Maybe in the future, run could be mapped to clicking in the left analog stick or could be toggleable with a press of the B button. That way both sprinting and seeing where you're going can be simultaneous actions. I also noticed something in this demo that I've been finding a lot in indie survival horror titles. When I would pick up documents or files, the game wouldn't automatically take me to a screen where I could read them. Which really sucks because I enjoy the hell out of these kind of in-universe world-building treasure troves. And that trait isn't exactly enforced when, for every single file that I pick up, I have to head into my inventory, navigate to the evidence section, and then find it in a list. Now, this next one is really important because, at least in my mind, most of what makes a good shooter is having its firearms feel impactful. Maybe some screen shake, a beefy sound effect, or some visual indicator of the small localized explosion that just went off in your hands. All things that I would say Samurai Unicorn is kind of lacking. I think two of the firearms that Chloe gets her hands on in the demo sound very, very wimpy, which really takes away from how satisfying they could be to shoot. I will admit that the shotgun is actually fairly impactful, but if you ask me, all three of them could use a little beefing up. Now, moving towards my own personal taste, I would really love for the heads-up display to be scaled a little smaller. At the moment, it serves its purpose perfectly fine, but it also takes up a large portion of screen real estate unnecessarily. And in that same category, I always hate to see beautiful retro aesthetic games like this mixing asset resolutions. I can certainly admit that I might be the only person on planet Earth who gets bothered by this, but it just feels like these three things probably shouldn't be on the same screen at the same time. So if at all possible, in the finished game, I would love to see some lower resolution assets for things like interaction icons and cutscene text. Getting back into the realm of gameplay, it is kind of annoying that enemy attacks can often blast right through your actions and sometimes feel like they've connected when they shouldn't have, which can be a bit of an annoyance, but pales in comparison to when you successfully pull off a parry but still get damaged by an attack that the game has told you you have just perfectly blocked. Alright, so even though I don't have a single second of experience in game design, I feel like everything I just listed can be fixed, and I have nothing but faith that that is going to be the case at some point. So instead of ending this video on a low note, let's return to the well of praise one more time to talk about the absolute smoke show of a presentation we're looking at here. And listen, I get it. Low poly PS1 inspired graphics are everywhere in the indie scene right now, and I could theoretically see why a person might be tired of that kind of approach. But I just flat out can't ever look at something this beautiful and say that there's even a single thing wrong with it. I mean the low resolution but somehow high detailed textures, the blocky character models that still manage to look amazing, the design of the world with its dystopian dark cyberpunk feel, and the gorgeous colored lighting. There's just no doubt about it. Samurai Unicorn is a showstopper. I mean, sure, I may have more than my fair share of bias, seeing as how I lived through the hardware generation being emulated here, but I've got to assume that even people who didn't would find this game visually pleasing. You know, I've talked about this before, but I think it's possible I just flat out cannot be trusted to give an opinion on a game's presentation anymore, because I have absolutely no issues looking all of you dead in the eye and saying that this is just as impressive to me as any modern 4K GPU melter. I can of course admit that there are less complex processes going on here and that there's no comparison in terms of realism. But I think what I love so much is that Samurai Unicorn does just as good of a job finding interesting ways of approximating realism as modern AAA games do actually achieving it. So I might be the worst person to take any objectivity from, but that being said, this game is objectively incredible looking. After putting more than 7 hours into a demo that I think could probably be beaten in 30 minutes or so, I can confidently say that Samurai Unicorn has me overdosing on hype. It has an incredibly fun structural foundation, and I've got no doubts that the developers are going to be able to build an amazing finished product on top of it. Like I said at the start of the video, this demo is only available to the project's supporters on Patreon, and I truly could not recommend that you add your name to that list anymore. I mean, not only is this playtest build a great little incentive, but you're also going to help a small dev studio add to the growing list of reasons the indie scene is becoming an increasingly viable replacement for modern AAA nonsense. Well guys, hopefully you enjoyed this new format, and once again, feel free to let me know in the comments if this is something that you'd like to see more often, and if so, if you have any recommendations for me to check out. Here's hoping we see each other again real soon, but until then, I'm Jared from Avalanche Reviews, and this is Demolition.
You would have made such an exquisite corpse.
That's actually a really interesting story. So the Cuban sandwich was invented in Florida, but it was invented by Cuban immigrants, and the idea was to approximate the medianoche, which is an incredible sandwich. But the idea was to make one with the ingredients that they had on hand in America. So no pan cubano, no mojo. And essentially that caught on with people who weren't Cuban immigrants, and when it came time to name it, they named it after the people that made it. I have not heard of this game, and to be honest with you, I'm not really a big tabletop kind of guy, despite me really getting into stuff like the World of Darkness and Shadowrun. I don't know what it is, but I can't imagine things the way that other people can. So my wife is a huge D&D fan, and she can't stand the fact that she can't start a campaign with me because I don't know, I can't do it. Maybe one of these days I'll give it another shot, but for the time being, I just can't put myself in that world without the requisite visuals and audio stuff, I guess. That's actually a tough one. I think for a while my favorite video was my how to play the entire Silent Hill series one. I just put a lot of work into that, and I enjoyed the process of writing the script and comparing all the ports and stuff. But when I go back and watch that video, all I can hear is how terribly I recorded the voiceover. For some reason, I was trying to achieve this YouTuber voice, and I truly could not tell you why I was talking that way. But to answer your question, I would say probably the last 3 to 4 videos, maybe 3 videos that I've recently released are the stuff that I'm most proud of right now, because I'm really starting to get a hang of how to EQ my voice and how to properly speak into a microphone. I've also been trying to make changes to the way that I write my scripts and the way that I edit, and I think the last few videos I released are showing really good progress and starting to nail down a different, more polished sort of style for the videos that I like to make. Rest assured though, in a few months I'm going to look at the stuff that I recently put out and I'm going to hate it, which I guess is not the worst thing in the world. It means I'm moving forward and making progress, which is great. Like the Hatebreed album says, satisfaction is the death of desire. I am not very proud to admit this, but I haven't had a chance to play Stalker 2 since it was released. When I did my video on it, I had that initial playthrough, which was around 100 hours. And after that, I started up another one to get some more footage and just to have fun with it, and I think I got 40 or so hours into that one, but I just really have not had enough of a break in my schedule to fall into a Stalker game. That being said though, it is really good to hear that GSC is taking a more active role in improving the game post-launch, because there were a lot of problems, and if anything, that's probably going to give me a lot more of incentive to start up a new game. Either that, or a mod that lets me kill stalkers wearing exoskeletons with less than 2 or 3 headshots.